We are joined by Ric Grenell. I couldn't think of someone more important to have on this broadcast as we are monitoring, and President Biden just spoke about this, I guess you'd say, historic hostage swap between Russia and the United States during a very uncertain time with our relationship with Russia. And of course, this has some pretty big ramifications. And of course, the conversation has come to, Rick, well, what was the swap? Obviously, we're happy the Americans were freed. We always want to see that, and specifically these two who have been imprisoned for quite some time. But who are we swapping it for? What does the deal end up being? And I just saw a tweet from you that really, or X post that really expands upon this. And it's a pretty rough situation.
Yeah, look, I think we've got to understand that we've got different issues going on here. The families of individuals who are held against their will, who are hostages or prisoners, they have a keen focus on getting their loved ones back. They shouldn't coordinate with the government. They shouldn't think about the precedent or the slippery slope that it sets. They need to be focused on getting their loved ones back. We get that. We understand that they have a very sincere desire to get their loved ones back. But public policy officials have to think about something else. They have to think about the slippery slope and the precedent that is set by raising the price on Americans just simply for hostile governments to get terrorists back home. And so that's where my concern here is. I have helped individuals, families from outside the government negotiate to get their loved ones home. And that's one hat that you wear, and you don't think about the precedent. You just literally try to get them home. But when I've been a government official, and it's my responsibility to make sure that we don't have a slippery slope, you can't do these exchanges. They're not a good idea. There's an individual that I just highlighted on X that when I was U.S. ambassador to Germany, this Russian terrorist, drove his bike in the Tiergarten, which is a park in Berlin right next to the U.S. embassy, in the middle of daylight, shot a Chechen and kept going through the bike in the bushes, and eventually was caught by the Germans. Took a while. We had to really push the Germans to show them that this was a Russian plot. They arrested the guy. They put him in prison. And the White House has been leaning on the Germans the last several weeks to release this individual, this terrorist, this guy who murdered somebody in the middle of Berlin in broad daylight. The Germans have now released him. He's gone back to Putin and back home to Russia. He's one of the people and the top person that was just exchanged for very innocent Americans, a couple of journalists and some others. Now, again, the families, of course, are ecstatic, but I'm very concerned about the precedent that this sends. Americans overseas now, the price just went up on their head. They need to be very careful about what they're doing because we are all less safe because of this deal.
Rick, we look at the pressure that the Biden campaign and well, not campaign anymore, but the Biden administration has said that they have put on the Russians for the war in Ukraine. And then you look at a deal like this where they get to celebrate that we brought Americans home right at the beginning of a Harris campaign to help build that resume for her as she seeks to be the next president. But also, it looks like a sweetheart deal for the Russians, for Putin. How are they going to square this, that they are the toughest on Putin and that he's not going to be able to get away with everything he gets away with when they're letting terrorist hitmen be exchanged and giving a gift to Putin at a time where they're trying to say they're strong on him, but also Putin favors Trump. So, Russia, but we're going to also have a great foreign policy win right here. Why would Russia, if they wanted Trump to win, why would they even agree to this?
Well, let's remember that Putin wanted Joe Biden because he was predictable. And someone who's more predictable is Kamala Harris. And so this gift from Vladimir Putin to the Biden-Harris administration and the Harris campaign is very clear. It is a clear indication that Vladimir Putin wants Kamala Harris because she's weaker and she's an easier opponent. So they're giving this gift in the middle of the campaign because it looks like the weak candidates, Biden and Kamala, are going to just celebrate this and not think about the slippery slope. Putin is laughing all the way. He got the Germans and the Americans to do exactly what he wanted. And do you not think that Vladimir Putin is going to be looking for new Americans to put into the reserve so that he can get others? Of course he is. This is why we are less safe. And I've heard from journalists for the last 8 years that somehow Vladimir Putin was interfering in our elections and they were distraught about it. Well, look what just happened today. Vladimir Putin is interfering in our elections and literally celebrating this gift that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris signed off on and just gave him. And I think it's really a signal of weakness, and that's not what we need from America.
Yeah, let's hear actually President Biden, who just recently got off stage discussing this hostage swaps. Let's hear from him. Let's give him a moment so we know what we're talking about here. Again, this is President Biden just moments ago.
So for anyone who questions whether allies matter, they do. They matter. And today is a powerful example of why it's vital to have friends in this world. Friends you can trust, work with, and depend upon, especially on matters of great consequence and sensitivity like this.
Yeah, so again, that was President Biden from just moments ago. I'll get Ric's thoughts on this. I think our minds all go to certain places when he starts evoking allies and why they matter, and it seems, again, typical doublespeak.
Yeah, look, what he's really saying is I'm thankful for the Germans who do exactly what I ask of them. And they released a terrorist so that we could get some individuals home. Now, look, Joe Biden hasn't spoken to Vladimir Putin in 3 years. There's a war raging in Europe because the German government and the Biden administration got together and got rid of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline sanctions, the Russian pipeline, got rid of the Trump sanctions on that pipeline as soon as the Biden team came in. Dropping those sanctions was another gift to Vladimir Putin from Joe Biden and Chancellor Merkel. They got together and they decided to not put sanctions on Putin's pipeline. Putin was very happy. So Vladimir Putin knows he can really outmaneuver the Germans and the Americans whenever he wants. This is yet another example.
And Ric, the president tweeted, "I will not stop working until every American wrongfully detained or held hostage around the world is reunited with their family." When you couple that with the soundbite that we just heard, talking about questioning whether allies matter, they do matter. How do you think the Israelis feel right now when he's making speeches about you have to treat your allies right and they really matter, and also that we won't stop working until hostages are home, when we know that there are American hostages being held by Hamas right now?
Well, I don't want to see any hostage swaps. I don't want to see any hostages taken. And this is the world that we're living in, which is why you need leaders like Donald Trump who actually go in and utilize the other parts of the U.S. government, the other tools, sanctions, serious sanctions, isolation, tariffs. All of those issues are how Donald Trump would get individuals returned home without doing the ridiculous swap. So you take Pastor Brunson, for instance, who was held against his will in Turkey. Donald Trump said to President Erdogan, "I'm going to ruin your economy tomorrow if you don't release Pastor Brunson." They released Pastor Brunson because they believed that Donald Trump was going to do something to their economy. And so that's the type of negotiations that we need. Somebody who doesn't just look into the prisons and say, who can we swap? It's such a terrible, easy way to do a prisoner swap, but it makes us less safe.
That's certainly the moments I miss of President Trump were moments where I think he's even been quoted saying, is like, don't be crazy, but give them the potential to think that you may do something that could destroy their country to save one person, to save one American. And we saw that happen firsthand. Ric did, and the ACLJ team did as well with Pastor Brunson. And of course, they did ask Joe Biden, did he speak to Vladimir Putin, to which he replied, I don't need to speak with Putin.